Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's 5 o'clock, so we're gonna get started. I'm Robert Thompson, principal here at Aki Workshop, and this is the first in a series of webinars we'll be doing about responsible hillside living. Our topic today is the EMA's biggest designated activity, 8C. Now, let's just give it a go. Who is the EMA? Now, this is the agency responsible for the policing and management of natural resources and the environment of Trinidad and Tobago. They do this through public education and high-level policy and decision-making. What is a CEC? Now, the Certificate of Environmental Clearance is the mechanism that the EMA uses to assess the impact of a planned development on the natural environment. This is necessary when planned developments fall within any of the EMA's designated activities. What are designated activities? Now, these activities were established in the Environmental Management Act, and they deem to require a certificate of environmental clearance to commence. There are 44 activities ranging from animal rearing to land reclamation. Now, the specific activity that will largely apply to people who are interested in building, especially on steep slopes, would be activity 8C. Now, this activity comes into play when your site goes above 1 in 4 slope, which is 15 degrees or 25%. Right? So how you could, we have an example on our Instagram page of how you could measure that as a kind of layman technique. But ideally, you want to employ a land surveyor to do a topographical survey of your site if it's really steep, because that's to your advantage to know exactly how your levels would work and how your water would run and stuff like that. But just to give you an example of what 1 in 4 look like, if you imagine a 10-foot rise over a 40-foot run, Now, I want to kind of give you an idea now of the application process. Now, typically, how the application process gets kicked in is that you send in an outline planning application to Town and Country Planning, and in their reply, they would give you sort of stipulations as to what to do when you plan to do your final planning application. And usually they'll say you need a CC if you're on a steep site. Now, before submitting the application, you need to pay a $500 fee. You could pay this at any FCB. You could get the banking information from the EMA because they're very forthcoming with information. Then after you submit your application, there's a 10-day screening process. And after that process, you will either get a notification of you don't require CC, or they'll say you require CC, and that kicks in the 30-day process of getting that CC prepared. Now, during that process, they might come back to you for information, for some kind of clarification on information that you presented. And what that does is it restarts that 30-day because you basically lose your place in line. All right. So let's say there've been no objections, no clarification required. 30 days pass, you'll either receive a CC saying everything is all good, and that CC would have stipulations as to things you need to do to respect that CC. So like you need to have specific protections for certain things that exist on your site, right? Or you could receive a notification of refusal. Now, if you get a refusal, all is not lost. You have 28 days to appeal a refusal. So then you could still end up getting your CC if you have a good case, right? Now I want to do a quick walkthrough just to show you how to get to your CC and what to expect on a CC form, right? So this is the EMA website, and it's for government website is very, very good. It's you can find everything you need here. So you just go to the Our Environment tab, click on CC. And scroll to the bottom, you'll get information about the CC, and then all the relevant information you need to download, like the rules, the flow chart that I just showed you, and your CC form, right? Now, this is your CEC form. Now, first thing you need to do is state what activity your development lands in, which would typically be 8C if you're building a house on a steep slope. Then you put your purpose in there, which could be construction of a single family home. Then you would basically select what applies to you. Evidence of, you basically tag everything that's in your application. And sign these two forms. That's important. A lot of people, I've forgotten to sign the second form sometimes, so, and they'll come back to you with that. Now you just put in your general information about your site and about yourself. If you are not the landowner, you will need authorization, which is an authorization letter plus the landowner's ID. Then you need to get information about the adjoining neighbors and talk about if you have a previous CC. Anything that doesn't apply to you in this form, you just simply put NA, right? Now, important things to note, they're really keen on knowing what the purpose of your development will be. So make sure you have a good description for it, or you just tell them a single family dwelling. Then you describe the topography and gradient as hilly. If there's any springs, you let them know that. Then another tricky bit is the predominant soil type, because typically you would not know what the predominant soil type is. And this is the key. This is the reason why most of these forms are filled out by design professional, because it's less likely to get sent back for queries. So this item about predominant soil type, there are many types of soil in Trinidad. Sand, loam, and alluvial soil is just like a kind of broad take on it. I think what they're trying to achieve here is the kind of drainage capacity of soil. So typically your soil will be sandy or loomy, but again, this is where a geotechnical engineer would come in handy to kind of help you with this part of the process, right? If you need to find out if your site is located close to the coast, a simple thing to do is probably go onto Google and just do a measure from your site to the coast. And if you don't fall within 5K, then you don't. You tell them, the value of your project, if it's $1 million, 2.5 million, so on, right? And that's the estimated capital of doing the construction. Now, again, you have to be very descriptive and describe the activity. So they want the total area intended to develop. Now, if it's a building, if it's a dwelling, planning usually requires you to only cover 65% of your lot, right? So that will give you an idea of how to answer this question. So if your lot is 5,000 square feet, you can only cover 65% of that, right? Percentage of total surface area allocated for covered space, 65%, right? Potable water consumption, things like this. If you're not doing something special, which would be designed by a design professional who would do this for you, you just say typical, because potable water consumption would be typical for a dwelling, you know. Then you tell them your intended date of commencement. Some of these things you could just put any, because production output doesn't apply to a residence, because that would mainly apply to if you're rearing animals. Right, so site preparation, you'll be doing excavation, so that should be, you know, outlined. And you could say things, you know, you need to tell them what you plan to do with the material you excavate, whether you plan to use it on the site, or you plan to remove it to a landfill, stuff like that, right? And, you know, does the site require filling? If it, you know, you could just say NA for some of these things, no NA, so on. Most of the stuff on this page would be are not applicable for a dwelling residence, right? Moving down. This is another important factor to state the mitigation measures that you plan to implement for, you know, the construction phase. This is to do with what you plan to do with earthworks and when you plan to start building. Now, ideally on a slope, on a steep side, you want to start construction in the dry season to eliminate any kind of massive rains that, you know, cause any kind of silt slippage. But you could also put in silt traps and specific drainage during construction to protect the environment around your site. It's important to implement those things. What else is there? Operational phase, you could put that as an NA. So everything further down on this form would not really be anything that applies to you. Maybe, you know, providing, if you, where is it? So let's say things like, let me find this. Provide respective estimate of that, no, that's not it. Yeah, everything going down the bottom here is really to do with other activities. Some of the larger, more environmentally intense activities. So everything going further down, you mainly state NA, right? Another, going down to the bottom here, if you want to add, you could add other relevant information that you could send in as well. Now, you would state what kind of drawings you're sending in. Now, ideally, you should have your drawings already done so that they could see what you plan to do. Without drawings, this process, or without a design, this process is really, doing this is not going to really help, because they want to see what you plan to do if you're going to apply for this thing, right? So that's it for the form. And things to send in would be your certificate of title, your architectural or structural drawings or civil works drawings to show them what you plan to do with your site, how you plan to do with drainage and water runoffs. And if you're not the owner, you need to send in an authorization letter. And then you attach your bank, your payment details and so on, right? So that would take care of the walkthrough of the form, right? Now, I'd like to open up for questions now. Is anybody still with us? Thank you so much. You guys can unmute yourself if you have questions. There's no questions, that's great.
I was going to ask one question.
Hi.
Hey, first of all, thank you for the presentation. My question was, do you find that the EMA have been quite accepting of proposals, or is fulfilling the requirements quite arduous, do you think?
I feel like this question has to do with the time it takes.
The time it takes, and I'm comparing it to, I'm comparing it to the process I'm familiar with. I've worked in Scotland for a bit, so we have to get building warrants. And so sometimes we'll send them the information, and they're quite quick in getting back to us, and they might ask for maybe one or two things to change or to clarify. Other times, especially if it's a bigger project, they'll come back and have a long, like 2-page list of items. So I just wanted to ask, from your experience, yeah, sorry.
The last few times I've submitted, I've gotten back response pretty quickly, and they're very, I have a back and forth with them over email, so they're pretty responsive, because I think it's important to them that their service will encourage people to do more, because it's difficult for them to police the people who aren't doing it. So if they make it easy for people to communicate with them, then it's better for them. So yes, they are quite responsive.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know.
We have a question here from Annalene. Why are you only allowed 65% of the total site? That's set by planning, depending on your area and their regulations for your area. So typically when you do an outline planning application and they send you back their stipulations, they will tell you what coverage, building coverage or site coverage you're allowed. So in some areas, like if it's Port of Spain, like Marvel Road, for instance, would be probably 80%, because it's tiny site and they're commercial. But for residential sites, mostly it be 65%. And it's important that you actually, save some of the site, because people just pave the entire thing, and that's to stop them from doing that. Any other burning questions? Is anybody planning a hillside build anytime? Nope. Anybody with any other questions? Okay, another question is coming. The common for, hello?
Oh yeah, Roberts, thank you very much.
Hey, John Clark, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Thanks for the workshop, man.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to know if the EMA would just read off of the form, or if they would actually show up and like inspect the site as part of every application.
Definitely. They have to make a site visit. They always make a site visit, because they have to. I mean, that 30-day process includes them coming to the site and making sure that what the information given actually corresponds with the actual physical conditions.
And the person doing the site visit, like what would be their technical background?
Well, I think EMA employs people who are geotechnical engineers, or mainly engineering background, I believe.
Okay.
Right?
So they will actually be looking for things.
Say that again?
Or so they will actually know what to look for and so forth.
Of course, of course, of
Right,
course.
okay.
But again, they need to have all the information relevant to the site to kind of see what you're planning to do so they can assess how what you're planning to do will affect the environment on and around your site. Okay?
Thanks a lot, man.
Excellent. All right, so we have another question coming in here. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Is there a validity period for this approval like with the TCPD approval? I think a year or more. I mean, I've seen people with CCs from like 10 years ago that they're still using. So I am not sure, but I will check on that one for you. I think it's a long time, but I am not sure. So I'll make a note of that and I'll check on that for you. Any other questions?
Hi, good evening. Thanks for the workshop. I have a question. I know you said if the slope is 1 to 4, right, that you would need to do this application. But yeah, you also mentioned getting a geotechnical engineer to do the soil type test. How do you go about sourcing that person to be able to do the testing of the soil so that you can do the adequate drainage, even if it doesn't fall in this 1 to 4 slope, but just to have an idea on any site. I know you're focusing on Hillside, but how do you source?
Great question. There are a number of geotechnical engineers. You could go on the APET website where you could find a registered person who you can engage. And yeah, I could send you a list of people that we've done work with as well if you're looking to do something like that. Yeah, you could engage
Okay.
just check the APET website. That's the Engineering Association, and they should have a list of geotechnical engineers that you could call and probably get quotes or get them to come and have a look at your site and explain to them exactly what you want to do, and they'll give you a recommendation as to what's the best way to go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Any other? Points? We went through the form. Anything that you noticed on the form? What else would you guys like to know? I think, well, the most important thing I would like to tell you guys is that it's important that you get a professional to help you with these forms, because it makes it less likely that you keep getting your forms back, and the process might end up being shorter if you have a professional who knows what they're doing, help you with these things. And I mean, again, you could shop around, Some people might do this for a small cost, some might do it free. You never know. I mean, what is the most challenging with building on a hill/mountainside? The most challenging thing with building on a hillside is sequencing your build and protecting your neighbors, protecting the slope. A big mistake that a lot of us make is when we look at projects on hillsides, we don't think about outside of our boundaries. And you have to think about what's above you, what's below you, what's beside you. You have to think about where the road is, you know, because if something happens above you, it's going to affect your site because, you know, everything is coming down. So yeah, that's the most challenging thing, trying to mitigate all that could go wrong. Yeah, hope that answered your question. Anything else? Let's see, we have another architect in the house. Who else is there? Hey, Tim, good to see you. We're coming close to our cutoff time.
Hi, just one more question. So assuming that, let's say like for me, I just got a lot in existing development, right? And most of those lots would be quite steeply sloped like mine is. So I assume they would have had to have a overarching CEC or EMA approval for the development itself, but that won't cover me specifically. I'll still have to go and get approval for my specific undertaking.
Yes, it's important to do that.
Okay, good,
right?
Thanks.
You could state that there's you could state that there's a existing CC, but you still wanna, you know, send it in, and maybe they'll say, okay, there's no CC required, but at least you've done your due diligence and put it in.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and follow us on Instagram, and stay tuned for the next webinar. Not sure what the topic will be yet, but if you have a topic you want us to talk about, send in an email. And yeah, thank you all for joining us.
Great. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.